I really like WALL-E as a film. I like the message. And this is the scene in WALL-E where he finds an engagement ring and thinks, oh my god, that's amazing. Because in WALL-E's world, which is just him as a robot on planet Earth, boxing up trash and putting it in mountains, this is something which sits outside his system of knowledge. This is something beautiful which has value, which he doesn't understand in the context of what he does. It's kind of a nice allegorical tale about things that we do value and things that we don't. When I watched this, immediately what came to mind was, God, they're making a Adorno point here. Everything else is trash, and there's something which is actually valuable and beautiful in the world, which we should concentrate on, which is basically what Adorno argues as well, that there is beauty outside of all the trash that we consume. Adorno's meta argument is that the things which sit outside the capitalist system, like works of high art, works of high culture, they're not subject to the same capitalist reproduction and constant reproduction. We have no thinking about it that mass culture in general is all about. So, where does this lead us in terms of analysing media itself? Amazon doesn't do these grids anymore. So I'm using a picture from Amazon from a long time ago because it doesn't lay things out in grid format anymore, which is not useful. But the point here is a spellbinding one. Do you know when people get into the third year, right, and I see people in the corridor and I say, hello, you know, so, Alyssa, I'm doing that. I'm seeing you for like 2 years, but what's happening? So, yeah, things are going okay, you know, I'm doing well in my course, I'm looking at it first and all this sort of stuff, and all the boring shit, right? And then Alyssa will turn around a couple of years' time and said, do you know what I still remember? I still remember the thing about the toasters. And I'll be, oh, you learned something. You learned about the application of heat to bread. Okay? Now keep that in mind, my friends. I'm going to spellbind you with some engineering genius here. You might want to take this down, but I don't recommend it because it's not pertinent. But let me tell you how a toaster works. A toaster is a device which uses an electrical element to apply heat to bread. Heat, bread, there's like an equation here, right? Heat plus bread equals toast. Are we all good with that? Excellent. I know some of you in this room are massive connoisseurs of toast because you are first year students living in accommodation in the university for the first time, and you do one of two things. Either you live off toast, or you can't make toast properly, which means you set off the fire alarms constantly in your halls of residence, and everyone else thinks you're a twat. So you fall into one of these two categories, right? But let us focus just on the main message here. A toaster applies heat to bread. Are we good? Excellent. I'm not going too fast, right? Okay. Now, we have here on this slide a selection of toasters. The toaster I like is this one in the corner here. Now, you can't see the price on it, but that toaster was retailing on Amazon.co.uk for the princely sum of £7.99. £7.99, people. Now, for £8, I can enjoy the product of heat and bread, what we know as toast. You know, make some toast, slap some butter on that bad boy, eat it, dip it in my tea. Oh yeah, we are cooking with gas now, people. This is the, I am living it large with my fucking toast, alright? Might even get some swanky bread to go with it, none of the fucking Warburton shit. Right? I'm going to get myself a proper tiger loaf, you know, one of them thick cut ones. Yeah, bang it. £8. £8, people. For £8, I am living like a king. But on Amazon, right? I'm just looking through all these and saying, holy shit! for £8, but look here. Damn! £165. Now, wait, now I'm confused. Right, okay, so there's one over here that's £8, right? What does it do? Well, it takes electrical power and creates heat through an electrical element, and you put bread next to it, and you get toast out. But now I'm thinking, am I living the life? Am I living my best life here? Because this one is £165. What does this do? Does this butter the toast for me? And then you look at the manual and think, no, it doesn't do that, okay? Well, does this, like, give me a glass of Prosecco or some other cheap shit while it's making the toast? No, it doesn't seem to do that. Does this massage my feet? At the same time, no, it's not doing that. Will it wash my car for me? No, it's not going to do that. You know, is it going to tell me how to get past that tricky bit in Grand Theft Auto 5? No, it's not going to do that. Will it engage me in discussion about the finer points of, the philosophy of Immanuel Kant? No, it's not going to do that. What does it do that's different? And when I get into it, it's like, okay, well, it does make 4 slices instead of 2. Now that's important, right? Because my £8 one is only making 2 slices. Now that's important. So for £8, if I multiply the price by 20, I can have 4 slices. Is that an economic thing? I don't think it is. Why do we have a toaster there that is £165? Can anyone answer me that question?
It's not a toaster, it's le toaster. It's French, so it's bougie,
Yes, it's French. And instantly that means it's better, right?
Yeah.
Because the French are notorious for their high quality engineering, as anyone who's ever owned a Citroen car will testify, which spends more time in the fucking garage than it does on the road. The French are notorious for their style and class and joie de vivre and all this good shit, right? Whatever the fuck, I don't know, I don't speak French, so, but I know some phrases and that's great. Right, but there's an elegance going on here, right? Look at this. Look at this bad boy. It's got like buttons and shit. And look at that. On the side to pull it down. That looks well made. I mean, that looks high quality to me. They're not fucking around here. And it's metal. It's not plastic. And it's silver. It's not crappy white, right? Doesn't mean I have to get all my shit from IKEA to match it in that horrible white colour that IKEA make everything. This is a superior product. I'm here as a representative of the Magimix company to tell you that this is a superior product. And this is the product that you should be using to make. Do you know what? Make toast with that toaster. It's going to change your life. You've never tasted toast like this before.
This is sponsored lecture.
Absolutely. I get at least 20 quid for doing this. If one of you buys it, somebody doesn't have to go out and buy me one of these. Okay. Now the point is this. In the distant history of time, some enterprising young engineer sat in a workshop somewhere and came up with a very simple system of how we might avoid wasting our time by holding a piece of bread on a fork over a fire to toast it. And instead we can have an automated toaster. And God bless that man or woman. Because they've done us a solid. You know, where would we be without toast? Many of us would starve to death. You know, it's one of my staple dietary requirements, toast along with pot noodle. You know, that's basically how I live. So, you know, it's one of the most important inventions in the history of the universe. It's right up there with the wheel and the internet. But that original design is perfectly encapsulated in my £8 toaster here. This £165 toaster does nothing different. It does the same basic task. And yet it costs 20 times the original. Why? Because it has a value outside of its usage. This is what we call exchange value. But basically, where Adorno positions this is in reproduction. We reproduce the same thing over and over again and slightly change that thing to add its value. So we could say, for example, this one has been designed by some famous French dude, and look how wonderful it would look in your kitchen alongside all the other Magimix products that you're going to buy. So you have a unified kitchen experience. Think how much better your life's going to be when you wake up in the morning and you go down to your kitchen to make toast and coffee, and you have the kettle, the coffee machine, the toaster. You've made it. You know when you go into your kitchen in the morning, you've got all that expensive shit there. Yeah, you're good. Life don't get any better than this. Adorno says there are two processes at hand here. Standardization. We standardize the form, and then pseudo-individualization. We make things look like they are different from others, but they are not. But that pseudo-individualization is where the value comes in. So just as with these two computers, the Apple and the HP, guess what? You can do the same stuff with yours. No problem. No bother. No need for Apple. Why do we buy Apple then? Good though, isn't it? Looks good, it's shiny. It's boss, basically. Apple machines, they just look so much better. They do exactly the same thing. There is no difference. Those toasters, they do exactly the same thing. There is no difference. Your trainers. What do trainers do? They stop us from scraping our feet on the floor and keep our feet dry when it's raining. They all do the same thing. There is no difference. What's the difference between a £100 pair and a £20 pair? Nothing really. They're all doing the same function. But we go for the more expensive one, right? Because the pseudo-individualization of it, the styling, the colour, etc., the branding, all just pseudo-individualistic points, makes us value them more in a capitalist society. This is the root of this quote. All mass culture is identical. Now, the essays that you've got to do in January, right? I've asked one of the questions on this to critically analyse Adorno's quote that all mass culture is identical. If you are of the persuasion, like me, that the best way to go through university is to pick the easiest option every time, that's the easiest question to tackle for January. All mass culture is identical. I promise you that. It is easiest for two reasons. One, the question is more straightforward, and two, over time, historically, the results for people who have done that question are superior to the other results. So I'm not making this stuff up. That is a genuine point. Why does Adorno say this, or why do Adorno and Horkheimer say this? Because they say that mass culture is all about these two processes. We standardize the form of something, and then we pseudo-individualize them. If we go back to the Marvel movies, the company has standardized those movies. They all have the same plot. You pseudo-individualize them by changing who the main character is, making the main character a woman, making the main character a black man, for example, in Black Panther. But it's the same bloody film at the end of the day, always. Okay? And you might ask yourself, well, why did Marvel do that? Well, they were getting a lot of heat in the middle of the last decade about the whole Marvel culture being white saviour culture. That every film was about a bunch of white American men coming to save the world. So they decided, okay, well, we make one about a woman then. Okay, and it's like, okay, yeah, we can't see through that Marvel. You're making the same fucking movie again. Oh, okay, well, no, look, this one's got a black man in it. Oh, okay, yeah, it's the same film. Because you standardised it. The pseudo-individualisation part is just a bit to trick us into feeling that this is something different. Our computers do the same. Our phones do the same. Etc. Our water bottle, that is a nice water bottle. I've been spying that, and it's like, that's pretty sweet. It's Canadian. Talk about pseudo-individualization in action. Canadian costs more money because Canada is a sign of quality, right? Okay, so it's these two processes which are at work at all times in the culture industry. We standardize and we pseudo-individualize. Now, I'm going to make a criticism about your degree course here a little bit. And in particular, I'm going to make a criticism. You haven't started modules like this yet, but you will be soon. But you'll be doing things in PR, for example, journalism, and I suppose video production, or web production modules like that as well. Unfortunately, I'm not bad-mouthing anyone, and I'm certainly not criticising my colleagues here. But what goes on is largely a process of standardisation and pseudo-individualisation. Because when you have to teach a large number of people at once, you can't help but do that. Because it's very difficult to give one-on-one tuition to people when there are like 30 people in your class. So I get it, right? So when you're learning to be a creative professional, actually what we're kind of teaching you is how to make standardized things. Like, here's the best way to do a PR campaign. Here's the best way to write an article about this or an article on that topic. Here's the best way to make a promotional video about this kind of topic. And then you add little bits of pseudo-individualization to differentiate your work from other people. That's basically what media professionals do. That's basically the media industry. Now, the more perceptive of you in this room will have already put the dots together here, but I've just also summed up your education from the age of 5 onwards. You have been taught this way. You have all been given the same materials. You add little bits of stuff to it, but you also have the same examinations as one another at the same time with the same questions. Right? You all did the same learning. You were all taught the same stuff. You didn't get different chemistry. You didn't get different English. You didn't get different stuff like that. Culture in this form does not just mean media culture, it means culture in a much wider sense. Everything gets standardized according to Adorno and Horkheimer. And because of that, we differentiate on the basis of small details which might make things look different on the surface, but underneath, the core is always going to be the same. So this exact point is why Adorno and Horkheimer are still very, very important theorists. Because this doesn't change in terms of digital culture. This is the same thing. If you think about it now, we have a standardized way of doing things on Instagram. I love Instagram because it's so fake. Okay? There's other social networks which have, no social network is authentic, right? But Instagram's the ultimate fake thing. Because nobody puts pictures on Instagram that are shit. But of yourself?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You might be right. In general, those of us who are sane don't put pictures of I don't put any pictures of myself up on Instagram because for some reason, anytime anyone points a camera at me, my face goes from what it normally looks like into some sort of fucking, Pablo Picasso-esque nightmare, and I look like an absolute stick. So there's no picture of me on Instagram at all. But for everyone else, we go through a process of Instagramming. You learn how to pose, where to hold the phone, how to light, what the optimum conditions for doing this are, what the optimum facial expression is, and then you don't just take one image. You take 25. You sift through them, find the best one, then you get the filters on, and then you put it on Instagram. But everyone's stuff looks the same. Because everyone's doing the same stuff. It's all standardized. Everyone looks the same on Instagram. It is an Instagram way of looking. So this still applies in terms of digital culture as well, when we standardize and pseudo-individualize. Okay? So this is no different. This means that in wider culture we have vast amount of choice given to us, but it's all the same crap at the end of the day. I love American supermarkets. When I go to America, this is going to sound really weird, you go to America, you can go and see anything you like. I like to go to Walmart. Because Walmart is bonkers in America. It's huge, and they have just aisles and aisles of the same stuff. And it is all the same stuff, just in a different box. It's literally, you are buying stuff on the basis of which box illustration you like. It is the same crap inside it. It's mad. We do have this phenomenon in the UK. Does anyone in here like Rice Krispies?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Good. I'm glad somebody does. Rice Krispies are freaking awesome. Yeah? I love Rice Krispies. I love the snap, I love the crackle, and I love the pop. Right? I'm down with Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies and me have a long history of like that. I, for some unbeknownst reason, buy Kellogg's Rice Krispies. I think it's largely down to the fact that snap, crackle, and pop are on the box. Okay? But in these times of cost of living crisis, Rice Krispies are now $4 for a box of Kellogg's. And there's me thinking, I'm in like Morrison's or wherever, and it's like Morrison's Rice Krispies are right next to it. The box isn't as nice, I gotta be honest, the box looks shit. But nobody's going to see the box because I've been shoved in the cupboard out the way. Is there going to be a difference? So I did an experiment myself. I bought Morrison's Rice Krispies. I felt kind of dirty afterwards, but I was okay. I have a bowl of Rice Krispies, right? Morrison's. Guess what? It tasted just as good. I mean, it was the same thing. So I did a bit of investigation. Do you know what? They're made in the same factory. Out of the same fucking rice. It's the same stuff. And I was like, whoa, mind blown. And then I remember, shit, I teach this stuff. Of course it's the same. I've been telling you this for years. What is the matter with me? Because I'm sucked into the same sort of thing. Standardization. There is only one type of Rice Krispies out there, right? Whether you buy Lidl home brand or you buy the Kellogg's ones, it's the same stuff. It's exactly the same. Because it's standardized. We just pseudo-individualize the product. That's it. We have this all across culture. It's like people who buy Nutella. Nutella's really expensive. The home brand stuff is the same stuff. Okay? Do you know you think when you use it, you think, oh no, Nutella tastes different. That's just your brain convincing yourself that you're not done for spending £4 on a jar of chocolate spread. That's it. That's just you doing the work. Right? For Adorno and Horkheimer, in any given cultural instance, to be pleased is to say yes. The whole function of mass culture is to make us into people that say yes to things instead of saying no to things. So we consume the best stuff and we say yes to it because this makes us feel good. I only use Rihanna in this instance because Rihanna is criticised as an artist for the use of one particular technology called auto-tune. Now, I don't know if you all know a lot about auto-tune, but auto-tune's been used in the music industry for a very long time, but there was one very significant moment in the music industry that changed auto-tune forever. It came in 1999. And it came with the artist, who is unbelievably still alive, because she's really freaking old now, called Cher. Do you all know who I'm talking about when I say Cher? Good. Okay, just because Cher is old, even for me. I was born in the 1970s, Cher was an old woman when I was born. She was around in the early 1960s, she's proper old. In 1999, Cher had a single called Believe, which was #1 for a long period in the year 1999. I know I'm talking to a group of people who weren't alive at that point in time, so it is a history lesson in some ways. I don't care for the song, but it's not my thing, right? That's fine. It's a really weird sounding song. I'm sure a lot of you have heard Believe, and you know what I'm talking about. Her voice doesn't sound like her in that song. Shares a long history as a recording artist. And if you've ever heard another song by her, you can hear her voice and listen to Believe and think, well, something very strange has happened here. And it's auto-tuned. Basically, they've used an algorithmic process and a piece of software to change the frequency and tone of her voice. What they changed it to was something that was being messed around with for a few years, about trying to find the perfect pitch for a radio song. A group of computer scientists and researchers and music industry professionals got together and started writing algorithmic software about, can we make a song sound like the best things that sell on the radio? So you take all the features of all the songs previously that have huge radio play that people really love, make an algorithm in it, and put another song through the algorithm and change the song so it fits in the sweet spot of every other song that does well. And that's basically what happened with Believe. And unsurprisingly, people went nuts for Believe. They bought the song in loads, but it's still got massive radio play to this day, and we're talking about 25 years later, right? Rihanna's entire career has been run through an auto-tuner. But she's not, I'm not picking on Rihanna in any way, shape or form here. She is not the only artist like this. Every major artist is put through the auto-tuner. You take their original work, put it through the software, so it changes the pitch, tone, frequency, etc., tunes the song to be as good as possible for airplay. And then you put it out. People unsurprisingly love this stuff. The music industry has been doing this for nigh on 25 years now. You can guarantee that that song that's in your head at the moment that you've been listening to for the last while has gone through that software. It's been auto-tuned in that way. It's just a natural process now for the music industry. What this means, effectively, is Rihanna is a product of mass culture, mass production culture. Now, Adorno and Horkheimer would take somebody like Beethoven and say, yeah, authentic art. You know, Beethoven sat there, wrote his music, couldn't really listen to it because what with being deaf and all, but you know, and then when some people take Beethoven's music and play, it's like, yeah, this is the boss, this is king, this is what we call high art. Rihanna, mass-produced shit, right? See, this is my problem with the Frankfurt School right there. Do you know what? See them two on the screen? I like Rihanna better. Way better. Classical music, boring ass shit and I don't like it. Classic novels, fucking boring. Have you ever tried to read War and Peace by Tolstoy? Book is shit, right? Dostoevsky, what a boring bastard. Can't stand it. Hollywood movies, do you know what? Amazing. Hollywood movies are amazing. I love Hollywood movies because do you know why? Hollywood movies contain my two favourite things: violence and sex. Fucking A. I'm on board for Hollywood movies. This argument is an argument of taste. It's purely an argument about taste. Now, what arguments about taste are not good at doing is telling us why this is superior to that. Because an argument from taste only says that you prefer one thing over the other. Well, we've all got different preferences. That's what makes humanity a fascinating species. We don't all like the same things. We all have different preferences. Something that you think is great, I think is shit. And vice versa. And that's how it works, right? That's how life is. That's why we have a rich tapestry of culture. The reasons given by the Frankfurt School for why this is no good and this is good are really flimsy. Because it would be my contention that the mass production of culture can actually produce really, really good things. there can be really good Hollywood movies. Hollywood movies which are artistic, thought-provoking, contain ideas. That's no problem. We know that this is true. There can be mass-produced music which is brilliant, creative, tremendous. There can be a lot of rubbish too. That's true enough. But it doesn't naturally follow that if something, for example, is auto-tuned to hell, it's no good. It might be no good for other reasons, but just because it's subject to the processes of mass production, that doesn't quite follow. But we can see it in other things. So, I don't know if boy bands are still a thing. I don't care, because I don't like them, because I think they're scum and evil. But what's interesting to me about the entire phenomena of boy bands in the pop music industry is that all differences between them are illusory. It's a formula. Okay? Somebody in the 1960s came up with the idea that based on the success of the Beatles, basically, what if we got 4 good-looking young men together and then made them, you know, they don't have to be able to write music, they don't have to be play anything. We can do all that stuff. They're just the image of the music that we put forward. And they looked at that and thought, yeah, that's a really good idea, but why don't we make it 5? Because all boy bands don't necessarily have 5 members. They can be done with less than 5. And then, so you stick 5 young lads in front of a bunch of music which is made by other people and mass marketed to people, and it sells a shit ton. Great. Wonderful. If people are happy with that, that's okay. Differences between them are largely illusory. Standardization, pseudo-individualization. We see this across masses of popular culture. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything produced in this genre is bad. There could still be some good songs produced by boy bands. Personally, I can't think of one, unless you count Backstreet's Back by the Backstreet Boys, which is an absolute classic. But it's possible. We don't live in the era that the Frankfurt School came up with their ideas in before. It's a point which I've stressed previously in this module. The ideological critique of the Frankfurt School is ideal in discussing media from the broadcast era, but we can still apply it to digital media today. As I argued in the last lecture before the study break, digital media companies want to control their audiences just like the media producers of Adorno and Horkheimer's time, but their methods are radically different. Rather than churning out ideological text, they exercise control. Digital media affords these companies methods of surveillance which can generate new revenues as well as controlling what we see and do. Controlling the means of production is nothing new, but collecting data is very new. But when we apply the Frankfurt School edicts, if you like, to this, it's just a business. It creates false needs, standardization and pseudo-individualization. No real differences, just one control. That's where the Frankfurt School remains relevant. They still tell us how digital media platforms operate today. They still want to do the same things. They are just a business. They create false needs. There is processes of standardization and pseudo-individualization. There's no real differences between content. All these companies want is control, just as media producers wanted control in the past. Those companies in the past, as I said in lecture 4, were all about creating ideological text to persuade us to do certain things in society. Economic-based controls culture. In the digital media era, it's a far more closely aligned to individual needs level of control, but it still works. Adorno and Horkheimer argued the mass media were responsible for the transmission of ideologies of a ruling class. They were at root Marxist theorists. Those in power are able to diffuse their ideologies in order to legitimize them to the public. This, my friends, is what we call hegemony. Have I used that word previously? I have? Superb. Okay. People never say it right. So let's have a practice. 1, 2, 3, hegemony. Fuck me. Audience participation, people. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. Hegemony. Thank you. That's how you say it. Now you can go to all your friends and colleagues, neighbours, people you don't like, and say hegemony, and they will be so impressed. Now, hegemony is a very important concept. What hegemony means is that there are a set of ideas which are taken as common sense. Write that down. As a definition, hegemony means we accept certain ideas in society as being common sense. But these are only ideas. They have come from somewhere. And usually, ideas which are hegemonic are the ideas of a ruling class in society that everyone else accepts because they are common sense. So, for example, it is hegemonic for young people, if they want to be at the top of society afterwards, to go to university. That is a hegemonic idea. That in order to be successful in life, one must have a university education. That has become a common sense idea. Don't go to university, not going to be at the top. Yeah? That may be true, may be false. But we accept it as being true because it's a common sense idea. Hegemonic ideas do not just come from nowhere. There wasn't like a hegemonic idea and I just took it and like bang into your head and you just accepted it. Hegemonic ideas are circulating in a culture. And this is where Adorno and Horkheimer start to link really closely with the ideas from Marxist theory. It's the notion that standardization and pseudo-individualization is a process which is there to actually facilitate the circulation of ideas in societies. We mass-produce culture in order to create hegemony. And we do this through the circulation of what we call discourse. And the best definition of discourse that there is from the British media theorist Stuart Hall, who sadly passed away, but is still highly influential. Hall's idea of what discourse is very, very straightforward. When statements about a topic are made within a particular discourse, the discourse makes it possible to construct the topic in a certain way. It also limits the other ways in which the topic can be constructed. So, give you a working example of what this means. At this moment in time in the United Kingdom, and indeed for the last 30 years, we are having a discursive moment. And we are having a discursive moment about immigration. Now, according to our current government, immigration is a big, big problem. There's too many immigrants in Britain. Far too many. And we need to stop them coming. And what in particular we need to do, apparently, is stop small boats from coming. I don't know why larger boats seem not to be a problem, but there you go. Small boats is a big problem. Because these people are coming on these small boats. Now that instantly rings alarm bells to me. They're saying like, 600,000 immigrants into Britain every year and they're all coming on small boats. It's like, how many fucking boats are there? This holy shit, this is like a fucking Spanish Armada or something. And then you look out and say, there's no net. It's like, maybe they're lying. There is no truth to any of this. And one of the things you need to do as media students is please get rid of two words out of your vocabulary. Truth and prove. You'll never prove anything as a media student because proof is the domain of the sciences. So is truth. Everything that we deal with as media scholars is discourse. There's no truth in this. It is a construction. And as Stuart Hall says, what discourse works to do is to construct how we talk about things. So if I walk into the pub tonight and say, do you know what? There's not too many immigrants in this society. It's all bollocks. Everyone in the pub's going, oh, fucking twat, get out and fucking knock you out now. That happens every week when I go in the pub, no matter what I talk about. So I'm used to it. Because what's happened in the United Kingdom over the past 30 years is that the media and politicians have created a way that we can talk about this problem, which is a particular way of doing it. And if you step outside of that, like I do, well, there's something abnormal about you. You're not talking common sense. It's all rubbish. It's a, you know, what are you doing? You're some kind of radical, lefty, pinko communist. You know, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, well, perhaps not. Maybe in the real world you're a fucking idiot. This is how discourse works. So you take it, keep on taking it step by step. Culture industry creates culture on an economic basis. It creates standardization and pseudo-individualization. But within that process of doing things, it creates particular discourses which, by necessity, are repeated over and over again. Because that's what standardization does. We repeat the same stories, the same ideas over and over again because we know they're going to sell. And therefore, we are creating discourses in society which, what we say, legitimize particular ideas and make other ideas non-legitimate. So if somebody goes against the discourse that has been created, that's not legitimate, they're talking shit. So you agree with that discourse, yeah, you're spot on. That's what everyone's thinking. Discourse is really just a group of statements and a way of organising knowledge in certain ways. Discourses then construct a set of beliefs that are held in common by a number of people. This is the power of how media works. Even in this industrial model, this is what media works to do, to create ideas which are held by certain people. And where does that creation come from? It comes from the constant repetition of ideas over time. This, my friends, is why I have such a problem with Disney. It's this reason. When we did the lecture the other week, we were talking about, Ali was talking about Disney, how awful that trope of the Disney princess is. If it was one movie, that wouldn't be so bad. But it's not one movie, it's an entire fucking industry. It's not just movies, it's toys, it's television shows, it's colouring in books, it's posters, it's everything that goes around it. Constant repetition over and over again of a way of organising your thoughts about what it is to be a young female. And it's hardly surprising when those ideas get internalised, Georgia.
Could it also just be a thing of they might know that our brains like repetition, so it's easy to prey on.
Absolutely. There is not just ample evidence from psychology that our brains like repetitive messages over time, but also, much more importantly, that the repetition of ideas in slightly different ways over time makes the acceptance of those ideas much more likely. Yeah, so they're not geniuses of psychology here. This is a fairly well-known set of principles. But yeah, you are right that this is, if you like, if you want to indoctrinate people, this is the way to do it. We already kind of know that from our studies, in media on propaganda, for example, as well. If you want to indoctrinate a group of people to have a particular set of beliefs, you repeat the ideas over and over again. I'm sure many of you in this room would have studied propaganda in the 1930s in Nazi Germany, for example, either doing history or sociology or probably all media studies when you were prior to coming to university. The lessons are all in there. When ideas become hegemonic, those beliefs are taken for granted as the truth. What's important about that is that's how people make sense of the world. The ideas we have, the discourses that we accept, the ideologies that we take for granted are how we make sense of the world around us. So if we have the idea, for example, that all migrants to Britain are not fleeing persecution but are instead here to claim benefits, when you see people who are migrants, you will not think of them as people like us, you think of them as economic scroungers. So when people are encountered in that way and they have been stereotyped in a particular way by a discourse, it leads other people to treat them in a particular way. This is where the the repetition of particular discourses in society becomes deeply problematic, because it does shape people's behaviour. Again, historical precedents for this are well known. You know, the genocide of the Jews in Germany and Central and Eastern Europe in the 1940s did not start like, do you know what we're going to do today, boys? We're going to kill all the Jews. That's not how it happened. It started a decade before, with discourses in society that convinced enough people that these people were a danger. So then you come to a point where you accept the extreme because you have been told for so long that this is something dangerous over time. Everybody operates through discourses. None of us are immune to them. We all understand the world through them, which is why it is critically important that we grasp how ostensibly power links to media content, because power expresses its ideas through discourse. Power up here, people who own things; ideologies, the ideas they have; discourses, how those ideologies are spread amongst the society. If you learn nothing more from this module, but you understand that principle, I have done my job, as far as I'm concerned, because that will be a message which you will keep on repeating. Power is expressed in ideology. Ideology is legitimized through discourse. The way we get people to accept the ideas of those in power in society is by constructing discourses which are repeated over and over and over and over again until people accept them as the truth. And even when people have accepted them, you keep repeating them, because you don't ever let up that stranglehold. You keep doing it. You know, Daily Mail every fucking week has on the front page millions of migrants heading to Britain. They've been doing it for 30 years. You might think they're going to give it up at some point. Surely the message has got through. No, you never stop. You keep the message going all the time. Because the minute you stop is the minute people will start to question whether it was right in the first place. Discourse and ideology are related, but they're also distinct to one another. So ideology is linked to certain people and a certain set of ideas, but discourse is much more diffuse, and this is basically from from the work of Michel Foucault. Power and knowledge are always intimately linked. Both are used in societal control. Power always controls and defines knowledge. That last point is really, really important. Some of you might still be thinking, well, what is the point of all this? In this relationship between power, ideology, and discourse, the end result is that knowledge itself, what we value as the things that you should know in a society, is controlled by those who are in power. Because knowledge itself is a discursive formation. Things that we know and things that we value that you should know are actually dictated by those who are in power. So the very concept of these are the things you need to know are dictated by those in power. That works on a very small level and on a very large level. At a very small level, like for example your university course, a bunch of people got together and decided these are the things you should know, including this stuff. Although interestingly, until I came here 6 years ago, nobody was teaching this. So I've really fucked it up for everyone else, I'm afraid, but I like to do that. When we decide, oh yeah, you really need to know how to run a PR campaign like this. Do you really need to know that? It's only what somebody decided. But that then becomes knowledge. In order for you to get a successful outcome, you need to evidence that you know that. And in society wider, when we value people with knowledge, you say that person has got the knowledge and the skills. Well, those are things which are just being dictated by those in power in society. Just to give you an operational definition of this. This is a very old example. Most of you in this room were born when this happened. However, you won't remember this because you were all very young. But in 2005, there was a major hurricane that hit the south coast of the United States. And in particular, it hit one city very, very bad, New Orleans. The hurricane was called Hurricane Katrina. And New Orleans as a city was really badly prepared for this storm. Years of underinvestment had meant that New Orleans, which largely sits underwater, basically, it's a city which sits under the waterline. So the coast of Louisiana is actually higher than the base of the city itself, because it's a city built on a swamp, effectively. It's been sinking into the ground since it was founded hundreds of years ago. Because of that, New Orleans has a series of what's called levees around it, which is intricate sort of earthen banks around the city to keep the water out, to keep the city dry, effectively. But when Katrina hit in 2005, those defences were no longer any good. This was a tropical storm, a hurricane, on a scale of which those things could not handle. And New Orleans flooded, and it flooded bad. Now, what was interesting about that flooding is this. The wealthy areas of New Orleans, where the citizenship of New Orleans was largely white, their flood defences held. Because they had had some investment over time. But the vast majority of people who lived in New Orleans, lived in the centre of New Orleans and around the centre, were African American. And those areas flooded bad. Real bad. And thousands of people lost their lives. There was no coordinated plan to deal with anything like this. There was no coordinated plan to evacuate people should this happen. I mean, people in the wealthy white areas got out because there were still roads and shit that was able to be used. But the people in the middle, well, that was kind of their fate. Now, some poor white people got caught up in this, but overwhelmingly the people who suffered the most were the poor African American people who lived in the middle of New Orleans. Tens of thousands of people lost their homes, lost everything that they had. But many actually lost their lives as well. It was a terrible, terrible incident. What we have here, my friends, is, if we look at these photos, we have two people doing the same thing, right? Two sets of people. We have an African American gentleman here who has some possessions in a plastic bag and actually a loaf of bread. Okay? And we have here a white woman with some possessions and a loaf of bread. Okay, so we have two different people here, effectively doing the same thing, trying to survive. You can see that that's pretty fucking bad, right? I mean, that's not a river, that's not the sea, that's a street. It is up nearly over their heads. So they're just trying to survive. This is how discourse works, right here. We have, on the one hand, two residents, Wade. Well, let's be very careful with the choice of words here. Two residents. These people are residents. Wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store. They found the bread and soda. Very important choice of verb. Versus, a young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store. So the white people found it, but the black man stole it. That, my friends, is a discourse. There is a discourse in American society, and wider than America as well, that says that black people are criminals and white people aren't. Those white people found stuff. How lucky they were to find things. That black man, this is from the same fucking website, by the way. This is from Yahoo News accumulated on that day. Like I said, this is like 18 years old, and I still keep using this because I've never seen anything like this since in my life. But it's such a perfect example of what I mean here. You change the meaning of who this person is because it suits a particular discourse. Black people steal, white people don't. They're doing the same thing. I want to be charitable here and say that those white people didn't steal that, actually. They're just trying to stay alive. They're nearly drowning, for Christ's sake. So's that guy. That guy's trying to stay alive. But he's a looter. Because black people are looters, white people, well, they're just resourceful people, right? We survive. We don't rob. might think, okay, well, what's the point here? This is how discourse works all the time in the media. That idea of black people loot, white people don't, that didn't come from nowhere. That's been legitimised over decades and decades and decades by the media. You look at any sort of news output on crime. You look at any story about the knife epidemic in London. I'm not belittling the fact that people get stabbed in London, it's a serious problem. You look at how that's framed and shot, you can touch the racism. Okay? You can feel it. It's tangible. This is a discourse. That discourse legitimizes an ideology which is held by people in power in that society. That is mass-produced over and over again by the culture industry, so we accept it as being common sense or true. And that, my friends, is how all this fits together. I will see you next week.
I don't have my ID card to scan into